Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining us today for the webinar of working with trade unions. We have a special guest, Lily Savage, who is a trade union rep with us. So we have a jam-packed session, which I hope you'll find useful. And we're going to have some time at the end for discussion and questions. So if you have any questions throughout, just pop them in the chat, and we'll use that as the avenue to answer your questions towards the end. Okay, so the presentation then, it's a practical insight for HR and business leaders. This working with trade unions is impacts everybody, and a lot more companies are going to fall in line with trade union recognition rights that are coming out in Britain, and also changes in Northern Ireland that are proposed. So we're going to take you through those changes here, and yeah, you'll have an opportunity to ask some questions at the end if you have any. So, introduction, I'm Aaron. I'm a HR consultant. I've experience supporting both public and private sector employers with trade union relationships, negotiations, and consultation, bargaining, and employee relations issues. That's across Britain, Northern Ireland, and the south of Ireland, and also other European countries where trade unions were active in the organizations I worked in. And I have Lily joining me today, Lily Savage, who's a trade union representative. Lily, do you want to tell us a little bit about your background?
Hi, JD, everyone. Yes, my name is Lily Savage. I am a national trade union representative. So I'm with Openreach, so it's Openreach Communication Workers Union. So I sit on the national team. I look after the entirety of the north of Ireland, England, Scotland, and Wales. I've been on the national team for about 5 years, and I'm also on the Irish Congress of Trade Unions Young Workers Committee as well. So I do a lot of work in the south. So today I really want this to be as interactive as possible. Please ask as many questions as you like. Could be traversing new territory for you. So by all means, you might have no experience with working with trade unions, or you might have a lot, but kind of just want to know a little bit more what that's going to look like in the future. I know with the Employment Rights Bill 2025, things are going to start changing a little bit, hopefully for the better, but I know that those relationships as well will maybe require a little bit more development. But yeah, I want you to get as much out of this as possible. I've also given Aaron permission to share my email address with any one of you who's interested in speaking to me after. So yeah, get the most out of it and ask as many questions as you like. Nice to meet you all.
Thank you, Lily. Okay, so why this matters now then? So both me and Lily have already touched upon it. So there's an increased focus on the worker voice, the proposed reforms in GB Employment Rights Bill, the proposed Good Jobs Bill in Northern Ireland also. So there's a growing emphasis on fair work and employee representation, with multiple cases in the media that have highlighted why this has become a bigger issue. So for HR and business leaders, it means understanding the legal frameworks, building effective industrial relations strategies so that you know what to do whenever you're approached by trade unions or some of your employees approach you about joining a trade union, and also being prepared for engagement with the unions. What we'll cover today then, why trade unions, what they do and why they exist, trade union frameworks across Britain, Northern Ireland, and the south of Ireland, current and proposed legal developments, practical considerations for organisations, and insights from a trade union representative. So Lily will give us a lot of insights into experiences that she has. So what trade unions do? Over to you, Lily.
Yeah, so I think this is really interesting, and I think depending on the union that you're with, some really apply this in a different way. Sometimes I joke that we're counsellors, we are legal representatives, we are friends, foes, and we're all of these in between. But I guess it's probably worth starting what we actually are in its most simple terms. So a trade union is a collective organisation of workers. It exists so workers are not dealing with workplace issues entirely by themselves. Not just workplace issues, of course, we also deal with things like neurodiversity, if you're part of the BAME community. things like that. They also come with their own complications as well in the workplace. And so we ensure that the power is work is not held solely by the employer. And it's also not a service that people can dip in and out of. I know a lot of people ask, well, can I join in a monthly or leave, or do I just need to join if there's pay disputes or anything like that? The answer is no to that. At its best, our collective structure has to be continuous. We can support one another and protect one another and push for better conditions and better treatment with employers if we stick together and have that continuous and bond, I guess, which I guess is probably the most grounded definition. But I think collective is the most important definition, because it is a banding of people. It can't just be individuals. I'm sure you've heard of the analogy of the one stick and the bundle of sticks. One stick snaps a lot easier than a bundle of sticks, right? So we exist to challenge power whenever it doesn't serve the workers. I could read this out to you as well. We represent members' interest. We also negotiate and pay in terms and conditions. We've just at Openreach had BT actually wider just had our pay put up by 3%. That wouldn't have happened without the union. Actually, it started in the pay negotiations at 0, and no doubt it would have stayed at that if it weren't for ourselves. We support health and safety standards. Most notably at Openreach, we make sure that safety equipment is up to par. We make sure water, working close at water. And let's get an engineering term. We make sure that the PPE is all up to date. We make sure that women have the right PPE, the correct equipment that fits. And we also make sure that we protect workers against unfair treatment. So again, sexism comes into that. Provide a structured employee voice, so a unified voice, and making sure that we're representing all of our members' interests. That's incredibly important in the CWU. And supporting organisational change fairly. That's a massive one. No change comes without negotiation with the trade union. So by all means, if the company is trying to put change forward, they have to come to us first to make sure that, one, it actually works for the workers and is fair to the workers, but two, that it has equality. And we will operate at multiple levels. That is very true. We have branches in different sectors. So you might hear a lot of local engagement. That would be your local branches. So typically managers and HR will liaise with branches, make sure that if it's a local issue, for example, they'll come to me. If it's a national issue, so if it affects a lot of members, they'll come to me first. So yes, we also operate, I guess, kind of like a whistleblowing as well. A lot of members will come to us if there's things going on in the company that they're not happy with, that maybe they're too scared or distrust the company, and aren't willing to speak to them first. And I think that speaks a lot to the cultures in company. You can, I guess, be as much of a worker voice as you want to, but if the people don't trust you, they're never going to come to you with issues, and it's typically why they'll come to a trade union. So I guess in a nutshell, we're there to make sure that fairness and equality is applied in a consistent way.
Perfect, thank you.
Welcome.
Okay, so employers and trade unions then. So employers typically engage with unions through recognition agreements. So they're very common, especially in other jurisdictions and certain industries. The recognition agreements are common. Sometimes they're they were agreed a long time ago, so very outdated in a way, but they allow for the collective bargaining of pay and conditions, and they sort of they lay out the foundations and the processes to be followed. Consultation processes. So unions engage with redundancy consultations, to be transfers, and any sort of workplace change. So any sort of move, implement new systems, or any sort of restructures. Individual representation. So TU reps come and a company, as most of us know, employees are entitled to be accompanied at any sort of formal meetings, employee relations meetings, so disciplinary hearings and grievances. And understanding how these interactions work legally and practical is essential for managers, business leaders, and HR. So union access, recognition, and representation. There's 3 levels of union engagement that typically arise. So union access, which can be representatives contacting employees, asking would they like to join a union, or workplace visits or meetings. So would they like to join in the first instance, and then also just meeting up with their union members as well. So union access to work sites and workplaces is part of it. Voluntary recognition. So where an employer formally recognizes a union for collective bargaining, or statutory recognition. So a legal process requiring an employer to recognize a union where membership support exists. So this is something that we're going to see become more and more prominent here in the future, because if employees wish to join a union, or a union reaches out to employees to ask them if they would like to join, and then the recognition process. So there's two options: you either voluntarily recognize the union, or there's a legal process which can result in statutory recognition. There's more on that which we'll touch upon later, where certain things need certain employers need to be quite cautious in how they handle this, because if they handle it the wrong way, the statutory recognition could just be granted. So yeah, so employers should understand the difference between access, the voluntary recognition, and the statutory recognition processes. So trade union law in the UK and Ireland, industrial relations operate under different legal frameworks in each jurisdiction. GB, the Trade Union and Labour Relations Act and Employment Rights Act, Employment Rights Bill. Northern Ireland, Industrial Relations Order and Good Jobs Bill, and the Republic of Ireland then is the Industrial Relations Act. So all recognise employee rights to join unions, and protections for union activity from unfair dismissal and detrimental treatment. And they all recognise a dispute resolution process. So the process is slightly different in each of the jurisdictions, and the bodies responsible are the route to resolve any sort of disputes. But yeah, pretty similar across the board with rights. The core principles then across all jurisdictions. So despite the legal differences, the employees have the right to join and participate in unions. Employers must not penalise union membership or activity. Union reps have legal protections as well. Consultation with reps is required in key employment processes. So any sort of restructures or changes to roles, anything like that, the union must be involved. Industrial relations disputes are usually resolved through negotiation or mediation. So what I touched upon earlier, those different mechanisms in the different jurisdictions, but there's normally a process. If there's a collective agreement, there's normally an agreed process of how you would attempt to resolve any sort of disputes between the union and the employer. Okay, so what is changing in GB? So the Employment Rights Act, the key proposals include simplifying the statutory union recognition process, expanding the union workplace access rights, strengthening protections for union reps, and increased emphasis on collective bargaining structures. So the proposals they indicate greater support for collective worker representation. So the union's right to communicate with your employees, you either provide them the union. So if the union contact you and they say we want to reach out to all your employees, you have two options. Basically, you either can do that on their behalf, or you can provide them with the details of your employees so that they can reach out to them directly. But you cannot ignore this request going forward. You know, when the union contacts you, they're looking to speak with your employees, and you have to give them that right. So employers will have 5 days to respond to union requests. And something really important for GB is if there's any attempts to discourage workers joining a union, the Central Arbitration Committee, so the CAC, they will apply statutory recognition automatically. So that can be done by a manager. So if I work for my manager and I go to my manager and I say, I want to join a union, and my manager simply says to me, oh, no, you don't want to do that. That, you know, you just don't want anything that would discourage me from joining a union. If the union find out about that, if I go back to my union rep and I'm like, oh, my manager told me that I shouldn't be joining, they will ask for evidence, and they will likely take that to the CAC. And if anything like that, any funny business is going on, or any ways to discourage union membership, that the CAC will automatically grant, in most cases, will grant statutory recognition. So this is where you need to be very cautious. Your managers need to be trained and aware of how they handle these type of requests. The CAC can also issue fines of up to 100 grand, so £100,000. So that's something to be aware of too. If they find that, you know, employers have actively not followed their legal duties with regards to union recognition, they can impose these type of fines. The process is different in Northern Ireland and in the south of Ireland. But that's for Britain, the GB. That's some of the things just to be aware of. So about Northern Ireland then, so the proposed Good Jobs Employment Rights Bill, it aims to strengthen the standards, so including stronger worker voice mechanisms, fair work principles, enhanced employment protections, and potential implications are a greater emphasis on consultation and engagement. And there was more came out about that last week, which Lily will probably touch upon later, but about Northern Ireland, what they're planning to do, increased expectations around fair workplace practices. So the Good Jobs Bill is all about fair working practices. It addresses 0 hours contracts and stuff, very similar to what's going on in GB. And the south of Ireland and the Republic of Ireland, similar to what's happened there in previous years. So stronger frameworks for supporting employee representation. So as I mentioned earlier, the CAC don't oversee trade union issues or activity in Northern Ireland. It's the Industrial Court. And then, of course, it's not ACAS, it's the LRA that do the mediation instead of ACAS in Northern Ireland. So the foundations of effective union relationships. So this is my personal HR experience. So the organizations, I tend to, I don't know whether it's me and it's a stroke of luck, but I tend to have had really good relationships with unions in my past. I've seen how they can really benefit their members at times. And also, like, I don't get me wrong, I've had run-ins and we've had disagreements, and it's good to have disagreements, but we've always reached a resolution in my experience, because once you have a clear industrial relations strategy, defined engagement channels with the reps to agree on when you're going to meet, the frequency, what sort of communication style works between you and the rep or the reps that you're working with. In one large public sector organization, we 2 unions that we recognize, and both the union reps were totally different in how they approach things. And I had to go at a different angle to both to explain, even just to explain where we were going with this. Both of them would hit me with different types of questions. But over time, I realized, right, this is what I need to do in order, this is how this union rep would like this presented. And then it meant less sort of friction, and everything was explained in a way that they preferred. So it's that sort of thing. It's if you work in HR, it's what most HR people do. We learn to work with all sorts of different personalities, different people, and trade unions are exactly the same. You've got individuals as the TU reps, so they'll have their own preferences, but overall, they follow the same principles of worker rights and to enhance the rights for workers who are their members. So documented recognition agreements, very, very handy once you have those in place, because those collective bargaining agreements just allow you to get to a process, especially if the TU rep changes or you leave and someone else comes in or takes over what you're doing. Having those recognition agreements and the collective bargaining agreements just lays everything out so that the process is clear for both sides. And also, in my experience, there's been times and we just haven't got to a place where we could reach agreement. We were too far apart, and both of us had to go back to these documents, the collective agreements that were so outdated, and go, what does it say whenever we hit this situation? Because it's written down, it allows you a process to follow, and then both of us would agree we would follow the process, and then we did reach agreement, thankfully, at the end of that. But clear consultation and negotiation processes, and you need to have the appropriate workforce data to support the discussion. So outdated data, stuff that's just not up to date, is no good. The unions will ask their members for this. They'll ask for evidence of this. They may ask you for this. And if you're presenting outdated data or pulling a spreadsheet here and you're making things complicated, that's not going to work. And the union rep will just tell you that ain't going to work. It means I want it in this sort of format as well. And this is just ways of working with people as well. I could send 5 documents instead of taking the time to streamline it and put it in a format that's easier for both me and the union to get their head around. But if I just send them 5 documents all over the place and I expect them to do that, that's automatically going to, it's going to hamper the relationship, because if you're giving someone work to do and you're not providing them with the easiest way to view something, it's not going to help. So that's my experience with working with unions. And then we have got what to do if a trade union approaches your organization. So these, and you're going to hear from Lily on the next slide, but these initial considerations for employers, it's to understand the nature of the request. So are they looking access? Do they want access to your work sites, your places of work? Do they want representation? Do they want recognition, or do they just want consultation? it's understand what are they looking for here. And you review your existing policies on industrial relations framework. If you don't have them, it's probably a good idea to put those in place now, and so that you're prepared, and you have policies which you can then share with them when they approach you of process that you want to follow. It puts the employer more in control of managing this in a way that's maybe works better for their company. But be under no illusion, the unions are well versed in this, and they will approach things in a certain way as well. But in my experience, they're very understanding of different businesses and that everybody's busy, and they will come in wanting to build a good relationship with you from the beginning, provided you haven't done anything to hamper that sort of relationship, or to make it not great from the beginning. Um, so identify them whether recognition agreements already exist, and ensure your leaders, your managers, especially your line managers, they need to know, because they're on the front line, and their teams are going to be the ones who are potentially getting approached by the unions, whether in a workplace setting or outside of the workplace. Their friends may have joined a union, and they may then approach their line manager to say, "Oh, I want to join this union," and they've already been on the website, they've already spoken to a TU rep, and they provide the manager with something, and the manager, if they're not prepared how to deal with that, they might just say something, and it might be totally innocent from the manager's perspective, like, "Oh, you don't want to join the union," boom, you're in trouble. So by training your managers and making sure everybody's aware of how to just manage trade union approaches, or approaches for employees with regards to them wanting to join or recognize the trade union, managers need to be prepared for it. Okay, Lily, I think we're over to you for a couple of slides, if that's okay.
Yeah, that's not a problem. I'll just go over myself. Can you see that okay? We're on the what unions are fundamentally there to do. Is that, yeah?
Yeah,
Yeah, brilliant.
yeah,
Yeah, we're there to represent members' interests. Not all members have the same interests, but we have to do it in a very fair and equitable way, and in a collective way at all times, ensuring fair treatment. It goes without saying. And I think the best relationships that I've forged with HR, and it is possible, I don't know if you've noticed from mine and Aaron's accent, we're from the same place and we are personal friends. It is absolutely possible. But collaboration, we do collaborate on a lot of things as well. So with the sexual harassment initiative, I know that we're just bridging the gap actually with that law in itself, with the Equality Law Disability Discrimination Act over here. But we're just bridging the gap in that law. It's not becoming more radical. And one of the things that I did personally is go to the business and go to the HR business partners and say, well, actually, sexual harassment is that members come to us as well. They actually come to us and report it more in the trade union than they would with the employer. And that was one of the things that Openreach noticed, was that members just weren't reporting anything really with them, did not trust the structures that they had to look after these issues, right? So one of the points of collaboration was, if to run a campaign where the unions were involved, and thankfully that was really endorsed by HR, and they seen the merit in having both a worker voice with the union and with them in tandem, because of course the law says that employers must do more to even prevent sexual harassment from happening in the very first place. And if they have all of the unions on board, CW, by the way, is not just the only recognised union in BT. There is also Prospect as well, which is a managers union. Also good to have relationships with them too, for managers union and workers unions, of course. But that type of collaboration is incredibly important. I know a lot of unions will perceive collaboration in itself with HR actually as collusion. A lot of them are quite reluctant to do it, and I do completely appreciate that. But as Aaron has kind of touched upon, there are two kinds of union reps usually. There's ones who see the merit in a good relationship, in a healthy, consistent relationship, where we know at the end of this there is a person that needs our help, and that should be the main focus at all times, as opposed to anything else. And I think a lot of the skills that HR aren't taught is the art of negotiation, and is the art of speaking to people. You kind of get that through time. You pick that up with interaction on a daily basis from people of all walks of life. But that union and HR relationship is a very tricky one to traverse almost. Yeah, so we also support organisational change fairly. That's a huge one. And I'm going to use some anecdotal evidence for that. Openreach wanted to remove all of the sanitary bins in all of their exchanges so that women in engineering, if they needed to, stopped, we know kind of what happens whenever periods happen. I'm certainly not going to hold back in how visceral that is. And it's incredibly personal to women. So to remove that facility they did that without union involvement, by the way. They just did it because they wanted to save money. And as soon as we heard about that, of course, we went to them and said, you cannot do this, and then launched a campaign about menstruation awareness, um, period poverty, and the business conceded and said, no, you're absolutely right. We should have those there because they're for stoma bags as well. They're for products. We shouldn't have our members embarrassed or removing this facility away from them. And thankfully that was kind of squashed, and now instead they've reinstated all the sanitary bins, and I've also involved the Fab Little Bags program as well, so that you have both. You have a Fab Little Bag as well as a sanitary bin. But going against that and doing it without union consultation, or even telling us why they wanted to do it, or presenting, as Aaron has again pointed out, concise data reasons, robust reasons. I personally don't think there's a robust reason or a good enough reason to do that, right? Probably why they didn't consult us in the first place. But the fallback from that was devastating for the business. And then to go back and then reinstate it caused a wee bit of friction with the union. But had they have actually approached us in the first place, we could have negotiated, or we could have talked, and we could have seen, or maybe done something a bit different, or heard them out and they could hear us out. But avoiding that completely caused so much angst. So again, supporting change fairly and early, and letting us know, or going to the union first and foremost, is going to be such a better relationship for the future as well. Early and honest communication, I cannot stress that enough. Transparency during change, and genuine consultation without being tokenistic. Again, with the sexual harassment stuff, we did really try and make that not be tokenistic or performative whatsoever, especially from the business, because from the members' perspective, their culture was rotten to the core and needed to be changed and overhauled. And we thought that was a good step in the right direction to involve the unions and let us say what we needed to. And we did not agree to it unless Openreach had a zero tolerance approach. And that exactly is what they've had and have had done since they've launched the campaign in the first place. So us all holding each other to account is incredibly important. Respect for the union's role is huge, is absolutely huge. I am not I know that some people see unions as adversarial or as problems. Unions exist because there is adversary and because there is problems in businesses. Unfortunately, the two are entwined very much, and we exist because those things happen in workplaces. So the best advice I can really give for anybody in HR, especially when it comes to respect for the union's role and consistency and fairness, is learn to pick up the phone and speak to a union rep, and don't be afraid of them. They're there to, they're people too. I know that we're kind of looking at the Mick Lynches of the world and these older men who like bang the table and have no emotional regulation, but thankfully we are getting a bit better. But even if they are like that, don't be afraid to pick up the phone and forge a relationship with them, because the best thing to do is to have that relationship and be able to pick up the phone and go, look, what's happening? What can I do about this? Or what do you think about this? Once you have that, your life is going to be so much better as a HR business partner, or whatever you're doing, even as a manager. Getting your line managers to be more involved with their local branches and unions is such a strength in itself. So I think that's incredibly important. Aaron, if you want to go to the next one.
Yeah.
Does anybody have any questions actually on that, or anything they'd like to ask about that just before I go on to the next one? Take that as a no, no problem.
No, I just have a comment. I want to say that
Yes,
that was really good. What you managed to do there with the sanitary bins and stuff. And like there's other solutions that you're probably right. That's why they didn't go to approach the union in the first place, is because they probably knew that there wouldn't be agreement with it. But saving costs and provide, and it damages the employees, experience of the organization if they're removing something. If you even the stoma bag, if you have that and it's just putting people in a situation, and there's other ways around it. I've worked with unions before when we've come up with, we can still reduce the cost. Maybe we don't need those sanitary bins in every thing, or we move to a different supplier where they're smaller or they're bigger and they get emptied less frequently or something. There's different options to look at, and that's why working with the unions who have done this nationwide, they can provide you with, look, we had this similar situation, what ended up happening was this sort of solution as well. So I've always found it was better to work alongside and just be open and transparent. So yeah. So then, no questions so far. So what makes a positive employer union relationship in your perspective, Lily?
Yeah, so trust and transparency is huge. I have done so many collective consultations, redundancy situations, voluntary paid leaver programs, all of the rest of it. And I am seeing firsthand what our members are going to see. And I'm also seeing firsthand the members that are affected by this. If there isn't transparency in the reason as to why these things are happening, if the data isn't there, if the words aren't right, as Aaron has said, we're going to pick up on it straight away, straight away. And there have been instances where we have managed to reverse collective consultations because we have had things to bring to the table that maybe the company hasn't thought about. Why don't you think about doing this, or broadening this part, but maybe reducing this and moving people here and moving people into other parts of the organization where the skills are applicable, but the people, the volume of people is maybe not great. Maybe they've got a big, retention issue in civils, for example, in engineering and civils. Not a lot of people want to do that work. It's digging holes, it's being out in the dirt, it's doing that kind of stuff. Some people like to do other things, but if push comes to shove and we're thinking about maybe reskilling and redistributing the workforce, that's a really valid thing. So there's been plenty of times we've done that. Professional, respectful engagement. I have been in plenty of non-professional, non-respectful engagements with different managers. That's okay. I think if you can manage to, it's concession, concession, concession. We're not always going to get to the place we really would ideally want, right? I've got an idea. My reality is this, your reality is that. If we can meet in the middle and realize that, just because I disagree with you doesn't mean I'm undermining you. I just disagree with maybe something you've said, but maybe not the whole thing, right? But and listening is a massive thing. Sometimes these things can get a little bit out of hand, shouting or leaving or something like that. And by the way, that sounds really hyperbole. It does happen. It does happen. Maybe at my level and maybe far too often. But listening and just trying to get to a common ground is so important. And I think the more that you engage with unions, like the more than I engage with the employer, he is actually my employer. I'm democratically elected into this position. I can see where they come from a lot of the time. I can see where they're trying to get to. They just maybe aren't articulating it in the way that's going to be digestible to members, or maybe they're not rolling it out in a way that's maybe too quick or it's not fair. If they're able to kind of listen to where we're coming from and know it's a logical place, we're not doing it just to fundamentally undermine people or to, we're not just all these upstarts or, anarchists, day to day. But we can sort of come to the table with logical things, right? So as long as you're respecting the author of the content as well as the content, that's really important. Informing unions too late. I'm going to use some more anecdotal things that have happened to me, I guess, to kind of illustrate this. I think that's more helpful. Openreach had a policy, BT has a policy actually about hybrid working. And one of those policies, which still exists in the company, is called three together, two whenever. 3 days in the office, 2 days at home. And Openreach decided just on a weekday to change that without consulting us. I think they sent us an email 2 hours before it was announced that they were now going to scrap that hybrid policy for some of their desk staff and have it just as 4 days in the office and one at home. This has disproportionately affected single mothers. It has disproportionately affected people who've had that have really benefited from the hybrid working ways, for childcare, caring responsibilities, even their neurodiversity actually. So because they just landed that, it kind of just caused a lot of angst again, and a lot of disrespect was felt by the trade union movement. And we're going backwards now in that policy. So we're now going backwards to see what we can do retroactively. It's really difficult to do retroactive negotiation, isn't it? Because usually you negotiate first. So informing unions too late or surprise things will always damage the relationship. Not always irreparably. We are trying our best to forge a way forward with that and make that as fair for other people. I know that there's we can do the working from home kind of flexible working, right? That agreement, we can do that. There's some local agreements we can do. BT has a thing called a personal passport. So if you're going through any difficulties at home or maybe life throws curveballs, doesn't it, right? So we can negotiate with the employer to try and do things for people there. But these kind of surprise things, these big changes, yeah, that's not going to make the union happy. So informing us too late or not at all is always is always the wrong move. If we're always there on the journey, we can help you too. And obviously this move from Openreach has caused the members to, I think we do like care surveys, your say surveys they're called, where we send a survey out to the members, get a feel of the pulse of how they feel. And that of course has gone down massively because of these changes and not informing the union. If we're not aligned on something, then you're gonna lose the raison d'etre of the workforce, right? So it's a bomb in your own face, really. Becoming defensive and seeing unions as the opposition. I think I've covered that, but but ultimately we're people too. I know there's a slight power imbalance when it comes to unions, and senior management and things like that, and that's why we exist, is to try and help that power imbalance. But we're not the opposition, and most times we're actually in agreement for a lot of things. Most of the time we can see the direction of the company and we know, right, okay, we're going to need to diversify. We agree with you on this. How can we get this better together? And that is the best place to be, and that's certainly the place that I strive to be in, where I work.
Perfect. I just from what you were saying with tensions, like sometimes I have been in those meetings and voices are raised and
Yeah.
but sometimes it's good just to sometimes we just leave. We say, do you know what? I don't think we're going to achieve anything today. I think we're just too far apart. And we both leave and say, look, I'll speak to you soon. Both parties go away. Even in those type of heated scenarios and argumentative sort of consultations, that you go away, both parties go away and they have a think about what the other party said. And this is what makes a really good sort of HR person and a really good TU rep, is that they can go away and think of things that the other party said and say, okay, I can really understand where they're coming from. I maybe haven't thought of that. And I love to hold my hands up and go, do you know what? I hadn't thought of that. And I'm going to go away and change it and then go back and say, what do you think of that now? And then also, I've had it on the other side where the union rep has said, I haven't thought of that. I didn't think of that perspective. Let me take this information. Sometimes they have to go back, to HQ and stuff and speak to them about it because it changes maybe the approach that they're wanting to take. But yeah, look, really, really good. Really good stuff there. So very interesting. I can definitely relate. So your tips then for business leaders and HR professionals?
Interestingly, we've kind of gone through this a little bit, but
Yeah.
picking up the phone early, building relationships outside of disputes, be honest about constraints. I think sometimes that relationship of picking up the phone, I try and manufacture as much as possible with HR, because there's a lot of information, there's a lot of policy, there's a lot of changes right now, especially. The business that I work in is changing all of the time, and I know that there is a person at the end of all of our decisions, but there's people that I'm speaking to on a daily basis, and like having all of these collective consultations and intense things to talk about, it's emotionally going to affect both of us. So I think being able to pick up the phone and be like, Lily, what do you think of this? Or hey, I'm gonna, whenever I'm doing my next presentation, is like, would you prefer to have this? One thing, I've got a really good relationship with one of the HR professionals, and they rang me and said, look, we were thinking of using AI to streamline the Your Say results. So Your Say is a survey, I think I've mentioned it before, where we send it out to the members and they will talk about what they like at work, what they don't like at work, what they think can be improved, or anything like that. And they said we want to use the comment box, and we want to put it into AI, and we want to see what the common trends are. That kind of might sound like common sense to other people, but because it's so important, I think, for members' voice to shine through. Like, we're not employed by Microsoft, which is what I said to the HR rep, and I was like, if there are certain things, I think you can pick those out, but realistically, it is up to us to listen to members and not outsource that labor somewhere else. I think that you should read that yourself and then do your own sort of data analysis on that. And she completely agreed. So, and that helped. It helped with us. It helped with us to discuss exactly what the minutiae of the problems were for members. If you just put it all through AI, you're going to miss out, and it could overlook certain things, especially if the prompt is to look for one thing. You could have, missed out a whole host of other things. So, talking to us, especially about changes, problem solving, all of that stuff, is incredibly important, and it's incredibly useful for you. You're going to get a lot more out of it than you realized. So, that would be my best advice.
Totally. And even what you said there about the AI, it depends on the tools that they're wanting to use, and the prompts and stuff as well. How exactly is this going to be configured? How are we not going to miss important things? Sometimes people raise red flags with regards to the treatment and all sorts of things going on through a survey. So by utilizing AI tools, all for AI for certain things, but it needs to be worked well. It needs to be set up properly. And the best part there was reading through the comments, because in your head, as you're going through the comments, you're starting to get a picture of what the culture's like, what the issues are as well. By sort of outsourcing that to AI, it can just streamline it and make it come through as just bullet points. So look, both have their advantages, disadvantages, but no matter what, the human oversight is always there key to get an understanding, because it takes a human to understand what could be the underlying issues here, what's maybe being said, but could be a deeper problem as well. So thank you very much. Okay.
No, you're so welcome. Exactly. And I was trying to highlight like you're outsourcing your own labor and then you're not a member of mine, you're a friend. So like
Yeah.
don't
Yeah.
like let me help you with this. So no, it's so
Yes.
important. You're just right. You're just right.
Yeah. Okay, so CIPD guidance for employers then. So the CIPD guidance recommends that organizations should train the managers on union and employee rights, maintain formal and informal engagement channels with unions. So everything that me and Lily have both went through today, hold relevant, up-to-date workforce data. So that's key as well. It needs to be up-to-date and correct for your collective discussions. Maintain clear recognition agreements, because as we've talked you through, that they're crucial whenever it comes to disagreements, or where there maybe, if I go off for a period of time and someone else comes in to take over my role, or I change roles, where someone can pick up where I've left off, and vice versa. Same for the union reps. And integrate industrial relations in the organization's people strategy. So filter it in. Whenever we're doing the pay negotiations, we used to start pretty much, we hadn't even really finished the other ones. We maybe just about finished them, and we were already starting the negotiations for the following year. And it's built in the industrial relations strategy, because we knew there would be negotiation with the unions. But sometimes it was all over and done with very quickly, which was great. But sometimes it did extend. It needed intervention with the relevant, ACAS, LRA, WRC. We needed to go there to get to reach agreement sometimes with it. So sometimes it was exhaustive and longer. Then further resources. So CIPD, there's further resources here. All these links. This is being recorded as well, and I will send out the slides to all attendees so you can get these links as well. So for CIPD covers all UK and Ireland. So they've got a couple of resources: ACAS, then LRA, and the WRC. These are the resources for just working with trade unions and understanding, what trade unions sort of do, and how to work alongside, how best maybe to work alongside them. So the key takeaways then: trade unions remain an important part of modern employment relations. That's only going to become greater. We did see with past government where there was sort of an attempt to try and reduce union involvement, but look how the tables have turned now. It's going to be, unions are going to be more present everywhere. So for a while, and a good chunk of my career, unions were just 1980s. Me and Lily had a brief chat before we came on today, and it was like unions in the 1980s. That's where everybody sort of remembers them from. But now they're going to be coming. The 1980s is coming back when it comes to trade unions, but only we're in a different era. There's AI, different workplace stuff. HR has evolved massively to be unrecognizable pretty much now from the 1980s. So organizations should understand the legal framework relevant to their jurisdiction. Legislative changes may increase emphasis on worker voice and representation. Effective industrial relations require clear structures and preparation, and the openness and transparency. Like everything, it's key to building good relations. So myself and Lily are going to have a quick discussion now, and so I have a couple of questions just to ask Lily, and then we'll move over and take any questions if you want to pop them into the chat. We're nearly out of time, but we can run on a little bit longer for questions, if you wish. So, my first question to you, Lily: if a manager, business leader, HR professional hasn't worked with a union before, what's the most important thing they should understand? I think we've got it, but yeah, if you could give us your take on what's the most important thing in your opinion that they should understand.
I think the most important thing they should understand is we're not being awkward for the sake of it. Like 9 times out of 10, we're going to agree on things. There are areas where we're going to fundamentally disagree. We're going to fundamentally be in opposition. That's just the nature of things. That really is just truly how it is. But the best way to approach it like you would any other colleague. Just do not think of them as any other like as something to have an adversary with. I am your colleague. I am here for the people. If you are too and our intentions are aligned, then surely that's what we should focus on at this point in time. I think the best employee relations person is one that can see from both perspectives. both perspectives
And
equally.
there's a lot of similarities with HR here as well. Sometimes,
Yes.
we go in it with that thing and it's like, you need to see it from our perspective. We're not doing it for the sake
Yeah.
of it. A lot of the time people think HR write policies and have these rules just for the sake of it. And it's definitely not there's a reason behind it as well. So thank you very much. Okay. What does good consultation look like from your perspective then?
Accountability, collaboration, honesty, complete transparency, cards on the table. This is the situation. We can't get out of it, or how can you help us? Um, there's been a few times where we've been given slides that just has data on it, and there's been little to no context as to what that data means or how it pertains to our members. If we don't have enough to tell our people or tell our regional coordinators, tell our branches, we're not going to do it. There will be a dispute, there will be a disagreement, we will put the heels in. So I think you have to have your cards on the table, no matter how ugly it is, no matter how bad the situation is. We need to know exactly, what we're dealing with, because as a trade union we need to be honest with our members, and we're not going to repeat a half truth or not the full picture as to what the scheme of or the scale of things is. So I think just being completely honest, no matter what that honesty looks like, is so appreciated, and it helps us forge a relationship. We have to be able to trust each other. Trust is the biggest thing. If I don't trust you and you don't trust me, we're not going to get anywhere, and no one's going to get anything sorted for people, So I think, yeah, transparency is the biggest thing, I guess, the biggest thing.
I totally agree. And what would your top three, finally, then, what would your top three tips be for building a positive relationship? So transparency, maybe?
Transparency, it's not personal, and if you're free after, let's go and have a drink and hash it out in the bar. Like I have no problem doing that. Most trade unionists don't either. Sometimes whenever we're in the room and we're shouting and we're screaming and we get out and we're like, oh, do you know, actually, I think we could just go and have a wee chat about this. Do you fancy a pint? Like, I know I'm not trying to promote drinking culture, right? It might just be an Irish thing, but so many of my issues and problems have been sorted just by having a coffee or a drink with someone, or even just a phone call to be like, can I just talk to you about this? And meeting face to face is obviously better, but if you can have a phone call and just be like, I can we talk? I love that approach, and I think that's the best thing. It's certainly how I operate. It's never steered me wrong. I've done it with CEOs, senior managers, right down, HR professionals, and spoken to them, been like, look, are you okay? Like, what's going on? Like, are you all right? A lot of us are trained first mental health aiders, and sometimes I've had grown men scream in my face, and I'm like, is everything okay? Sometimes it's just that meeting people on the level, but that would be my best advice. Just,
Brilliant.
pick up the phone. It's not a problem.
Yeah. Yeah. So many things. Even though you're giving it from a union perspective, from a HR perspective, and even from a business perspective,
Yeah.
literally just talking things through, picking up the phone, going for lunch together afterwards, and knowing just how to move on. Like, I was in a Spanish construction firm before that, and that was one of the things. Whenever we were expanding, we were bringing expats from Spain and other countries to work in our projects across North Europe. One of the things was that in Spain, it was very common for people to be very angry or not have the agreement. But then after work, because of the culture in Spain, people tended to all go for dinner, or maybe a drink or something, or coffee. And then they resolved a lot of the issues they had outside of the actual workplace, but it fed back. So, look, thank you so much, Lily.
So welcome.
Thank you everybody for attending today. I hope that you've enjoyed it and you leave with more knowledge, and that you feel more confident engaging with your trade unions. So this is all my socials and website and stuff. I do actually give training to managers and different business leaders on working with trade unions. So that's one of the things that I can do. But if you want to find out a little bit more, you can also add me in LinkedIn or drop me an email. Lily's also going to be giving me her email address to share as well, which already given me permission to share it, and I already have it. So now it's time for any questions. I apologize for running over a little bit. We had a lot to cover. Okay, we'll give it another 10 or 20 seconds. I can't believe people don't have any questions. Maybe we were that clear, Lily, on how to work with trade unions to build good relationships.
It really is how you approach it, to be honest. Not all of them are the same. Not all of them are as nice as me. I completely appreciate that. But have a stab at it. You'll probably be better at it than you think.
Totally. And also, like, I've came across and I just went with me and that union rep just don't get on it
Yeah.
initially. It's just like, no, we're too far apart. And it's just dealing with people like we do with managers deal with different people in their teams. Everybody's different, how you approach things, how they see things. And it's just learning to work with other people and different opinions. But ultimately, we both we both come from a place of good. All
Yeah.
HR is obviously employed by the employer. They walk on a tightrope of trying to balance employee and employer sort of relationships, and trying to do the best for both. And then the unions are there to support both as well. Even you having the different, if it doesn't work out and the business fails, then there's no employees and there's no need for union representation either. So it all comes together. It all feeds in. But yeah, look, there's no questions coming through there. Thanks so much, Lily, for your time today. Really enjoyed it,
Thank you
and
all.
thank you all for attending.
You take care of yourselves.